Hello and welcome back. Now we're going to have a marketing presentation from the team at Pure Cars. We have Lauren Donalson, who's the Senior Director of National Accounts, and we have Jeremy Anspach, who is the CEO and founder. They've got a really great presentation set up for you, and if you'd like, go ahead and cue it up, Lauren, and we'll go ahead and make the audience just a little bit smarter.
Okay, well, Jeremy, we will kick it off with you here.
Sounds good. Well, David, thank you for the kind intro. And I was hoping we could do this again in Kentucky, as I've enjoyed several of them. And with everything going on this year, it's expected to be virtual, of course. And I'm hopeful we can help your dealers thrive as we've done in person to person and now do it virtually.
Absolutely.
So with that, a little bit about myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jeremy Anspach. I'm the founder and CEO of Pure Cars. I live here in Charleston, South Carolina, but I grew up in Detroit, and Motor City runs through my blood, to say the least. I've been an entrepreneur my whole career and have focused all my efforts to help the auto industry thrive. And you can see from the pictures here, I'm actually a gearhead, from building motors to fun cars. And my twin boys, Eli and Noah, have a passion for it. But most importantly, my daughter, Maya, who's 4, if she was next to me right now, she'd be proud to say she can shift first through third from the passenger seat. So hopefully my kids know what 3 pedals are and have a love for cars as I've had my whole career. With me today is Lauren. Lauren is an incredible asset to Pure Cars and has been in the industry her whole career. And with that, Lauren, I'd love for you to go through your intro.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Jeremy. And thanks, David, for having us. As David mentioned, I'm Lauren Donalson, the Senior Director of National Accounts at Pure Cars. I've been with Pure Cars for a little over 5 years. And prior to that, had OEM experience with Toyota. But I am known in the Pure Cars walls as our reigning PhD, and that stands for Papa Has a Dealership, right? So I'm a 3rd generation dealer kid. There's a photo down here on the bottom right of an ad that our family's dealership took out in the 1950s, and cut my teeth, working in parts, actually, in the Texas summer heats. And kind of worked my way through every department. Similar to Jeremy, my goals here are really to help the auto dealers thrive and with the visibility into our current customer base, help solve problems. And I'm looking forward to talking to you guys today about how we can help you finish this year strong and look into next year and move forward on a high note. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Lauren. So, pandemic fatigue. I think one thing is obvious. We're all tired, and this year is worn on everyone. And this quote unquote new normal is really becoming old news. But we're still in a pandemic. We have massive uncertainty with a lot of unknowns. We're going into the winter. More and more people are staying indoors. What's that going to change with COVID cases? How will that impact local municipality and government, and most importantly, dealership operations? As we rewind and look at what has this pandemic really done, it's made us understand how to be more nimble. But one thing that's come from this is we're seeing a lot of shiny new objects, and there's fatigue with this. We're seeing vendors showing all these trend reports. We're seeing numerous different digital retailing tools. We're seeing payment tools, 360 videos, looking at AI and machine learning and how that can impact your business, and OTT and CTV and better media plans. And why are you pricing your cars so low? There's a shortage of used cars. There's a tremendous amount of shiny new objects. And oftentimes when a human gets tired, whether you're the best in your business or not, it's easy to fall into the same old habits. And as the adage goes, if you change nothing, nothing will change. And I think when we go through some key blind spots, I really want to talk a little bit about muscle memory. And muscle memory is real. It's doing the same thing we've always done. We actually have muscle memory, but the way we think of business, the way we run a dealership, the way we run our lives, we have muscle memory. And when you think about the way we've always done it, we're talking right now with many dealers that are talking about finishing Q4 strong. Knock on wood, 2020 will actually be an incredible year financially for auto dealers. But as we're planning 2021, we're talking to dealers who are looking at what is their sales forecast going to be? How much of that percentage do they want to allocate towards their marketing budget? And then they set their budget. They look at how much they want to spend per channel, TV, radio, search, display, social, maybe OTT, etc. They may even make vendor changes. And then they ultimately hope for the best. And this is muscle memory. When you think about the way the pros do it, I think Amazon, look at the disruptor in our industry being Carvana, or take the small fraction of truly top performing dealers. They have a different thesis. They're really looking at continuously driving ad costs down per unit sold and maximizing sales. And when you think about the way they're doing this, each of these companies have given serious thought to how they're going to spend media dollars to acquire a sale. It isn't really budget based. They don't have finite budgets or caps. They don't pre-think what media channel will, with prediction, be the best. They're thinking in far more real time. Said differently, they don't really have bias in their plan. And if you continue running on muscle memory, you are running blind. And there's going to be 4 key things we're going to hit on in this presentation. Lauren's going to go through a few of them, and I will as well. To your own circumstances, to what actually works, to consumer behavior, to the big picture, you're going to learn a lot of great things here. And I think when you end this presentation, I'm hopeful you'll have action items and actually feel comfortable about why you have those action items, because we're going to show you some data from the thousands of dealers we work with that will ultimately show that if you can overcome these blind spots, you've got a great chance of finishing the year strong and having a great 2021. So with that, Lauren, over to you.
Thanks, Jeremy. All right, so as Jeremy just mentioned, the first blind spot we're going to cover, when you're operating on muscle memory, you're blind to your own circumstances. And so I'm going to surface a couple of quotes that are humorous if you look at them today, but they're both a couple of quotes from reputable sources that were published in January and February earlier this year. The first one, prospects for 2020 are shaping up to be quite stable, though volume is expected to be a bit lower. I don't know about any of you, but when I think of the year 2020, stable is not the first word that comes to mind, right? If anything, it's been quite the opposite. There's been quite a bit of instability. Another one here is the second half of this one. We're actually expecting supply levels to kind of maintain in 2020 with similar levels to what we saw here in 2019, and then actually grow by 2022. And good grief, with the combination of manufacturer shutdowns, as well as increased auction prices on the wholesale side of things, supply levels have been quite volatile and constrained this year, right? So these are 2 things that, as we looked at the year from January, we saw different things take shape as the pandemic hit and circumstances changed. So the point of all this is, in the blink of an eye, you may need to pivot based on what your circumstances are. And what we're going to do right now is take a look at a dealer who did such and benefited from the changes that he instituted. So when we take a look at this dealer, it's a Toyota dealership in Tennessee. We're taking a look at a couple different things of their pre-pandemic spend, right? They're spending probably similar to how many of you were spending when you looked at your ad budgets earlier this year. Heavily favors new, right? So a Toyota dealer, you can bank on your new car sales, likely helping you hit your sales objectives, and 100% allocated to paid search, which traditionally speaking, again, not the worst strategy in the world. It's low funnel traffic. But what happens when the transit trucks start showing up half empty or not at all, and new inventory is at a premium, or again, it's constrained? You gotta pivot. You're gonna start to realize that your sales objectives are gonna have to have more used car volume in them than they had before. Another trend from the Pure Car side that we noted is that Facebook usership skyrocketed starting from March and really has maintained that same trajectory all year. Facebook reported that usership is up about 12% year over year. And when we're talking about billions of users, that's a massive impact. So we have a saying at Pure Cars: if you're going to fail, fail fast and then pivot And that's what we helped this dealer do. In June, we flipped the script, no longer operating on muscle memory. He diversified his spend and adapted to his new circumstances. So we allocated 30% of his spend to used. That's now 30/70 by Profit Center. We also diversified their spend from a channel set. We've got 40% allocated to Facebook, where we saw massive efficiencies, and kept paid search as 60% of it, so still in favor. Again, it's low funnel traffic, but took advantage of the new circumstances that we're under. And what are the results? Well, on roughly the same amount of spend, the dealer's cost per sale decreased by 30%. We saw over 3x the revenue on the dealer side and over 8x the return on ad spend. This dealer had their best ever sales month, their best ever profit month, and they did so by not operating on muscle memory, but rather pivoting as their circumstances changed. So as I think about the key takeaways from this first blind spot, it's first, trying to predict the future is officially an exercise in futility. So rather than trying to read your crystal ball, read the room, take into account what your new circumstances are, and be willing to pivot where needed. And Jeremy, anything else that you'd like to add on this one before we move on?
Yeah, what I think of this first blind spot, it's really remove bias. Just because a media channel did exceptionally well, or the mix of where you allocated dollars amongst your profit centers within your dealership did well for you last month or last quarter or last year, the pros, the best of the best, are thinking far more real time and continuously looking at how do you lower ad cost per unit sale. And with that, it's this really positive engine that has great results.
Right on. Okay, so we're going to move on to blind spot number 2. Again, Jeremy mentioned it at the top. When you're operating on muscle memory, you're also blind to consumer behavior, which is another thing that we've seen change here over the last, call it 6 to 9 months. Another couple of quotes. This time we're looking in the rear view mirror, so to speak. Hindsight 2020, no pun intended. So these are less humorous; they're more accurate. The first one is, it's not likely we'll see a major shift back to pre-COVID-19 shopping. And what this quote is actually talking about is probably the hottest topic of the year in automotive marketing. It's the concept of digital retailing and e-commerce. And having known David for years now, he's been preaching the ramifications of this change, right? That customers want dealers to be transparent. They want dealers to be easy to transact with. And if we're looking for a silver lining from this devastating pandemic, in the automotive marketing side of things, it's that COVID-19 has brought the dealer closer to what the consumer wants for both of those things, transparency and easy to transact with. And those have come in the shape of digital retail. And it's not likely that we'll see consumers change their expectations moving forward. This is something they've been asking for years. They're happy to have it now, and we don't expect that will shift. On the media side of things, we've also observed a significant change in the way that consumers are consuming video. So over 3/4 of US households are now subscribing to OTT, or over the top, also known as connected TV, video streaming services. That actually beats out traditional pay TV households at just 62%. We also are familiar with the term cord cutter. 1 in 3 US households now have completely cut the cord and can only be reached via OTT. So that's something that PureCars had to take note of, and it's something that we've worked hard to, over the last couple of months, help our dealers leverage this new opportunity and the shift in consumer behavior. So we've got a quick little lesson in math for everyone here today. The draw when I think about traditional media spend on television, cable broadcast, is that it's a mass appeal for relatively cheap costs, right? So on the broadcast side of things, it's typically $7 to serve 1,000 ads, $20 on cable. And that's appealing. You can get your message out to the masses, again, for a cheap cost. But when you buy traditional TV media, same thing goes for radio, you're typically buying by what, right? You're buying by the time slot, the channel, Maybe I want to make sure that it's sports and news. Maybe I want to make sure I'm serving on the golf TV network, something along those lines. What you're not buying your media by is by who is going to consume it. Who's your target audience? And so I like to think of this as a pie, and you see this here on the low left part of the screen here. If we start off with 100% of everyone watching golf TV or the morning news, okay, that's at that $7 or $20 mark. But when we look at, JDP, SAR predictions, it's roughly 11% of the market is actually in the market to buy a car at any given point. So in the blink of an eye, over 80% of that budget is now wasted spend because we're serving ads to people who are not in market. Then when we take that a step further, and we think about how many folks are actually in market to buy your car, right? The vehicles that you're selling. If you're a mass production brand, a Toyota, GM, Ford, maybe you've got 8 to 10% of that initial 11%. It's actually far fewer for those of you who are luxury or niche brands, right? So what happens to that initial appeal of $7 or $20 to get in front of 1,000 people? When we take into account the massive wastes, that $7 per thousand effectively is $230 to reach someone who's in market. Your cable TV buy moves from that $20 number to $689 to hit someone that's in market. What's really great about OTT is that you're only serving ads to people who've identified themselves as in market because of the data that we have from a digital perspective. So that $34 that is the onset cost per thousand is the same thing as the effective cost per thousand because there's no ad waste. The last piece that I'll mention on this is that OTT is also unskippable ads, so you're guaranteed that those ads are viewed, which is not necessarily a benefit of broadcasting cable. So when we think about the takeaways from this one, to me, it's fish where the fish are, right? So we've observed consumer behavior has swung in favor of digital streaming video. So we're now pursuing that as an active medium for dealers. You can expect the unexpected. It may be that if we would join you guys in Kentucky this time next year, that there's a totally new medium that dealers are leveraging, right? So expect the unexpected. But when you see an opportunity, seize it. And I think that there's been one presented as far as digital OTT, over-the-top connected TV is concerned. Jeremy, what else do you have to add here?
I think it goes back to the concept of bias. If you're really looking at it right now, we're seeing exceptional results with OTT. And when you think back 5 years ago, well, TV may have been the option you needed for that type of brand awareness. But now you can be far more targeted for far less cost overall. And with that, to your point, a year from now, OTT may or may not be an incredible channel. But as long as you know wherever the consumer is and you have a mechanism how to attract that customer for the lowest cost per unit sold, you'll always be ahead of the game and act like the pros do.
Right on. Agreed. Okay. Brings us to blind spot number 3. If you're operating on muscle memory, you're blind to what actually works. And first, we got to define what does working mean, right? And if we were all in the same room today, this would be the part where I'd ask, raise your hand if you in the room are selling impression shares. Anybody selling VDP views? How about engagements? I imagine we'd have an empty room, no hands, no hands raised. No, what we're selling, we're trying to move some metal here, right? We're trying to sell cars and sell service. So we should measure our ads efficacy based on those things. And our advertisements, the creative, should be things that entice customers to take action, the actions that we care about, purchases of vehicle sales, parts, and service. And so with that, Jeremy and I are going to take a 30-second water break, and we're just going to play a video reel of ads that we think or we have proven are ads that incite customers to take those actions. All right. So when I watch that video reel, I think to myself, okay, we've got VIN specific advertising with calls to action. We've got offers present on the ad. That's certainly going to drive the consumer behavior that I'm looking for as an actual result. So moving forward, when we look at, again, pre-pandemic muscle memory, don't be this guy who looks at the page and sees, okay, my impression share went up. That's a victory for me. But my sales went down. Cost per sale is up. I spent more to sell less. We don't want to be that guy. We should be measuring based on a single source of truth. And that's cost per sale, cost per RO. At the end of the day, those are the two things that matter most. And so when I think about this, I think we're probably all on the same page now. The next step is, okay, well, how do I do it? And really, it's a matter of leveraging the data and insights that your partners can help surface to you. And what we do really well at Pure Cars is we actually take into account what velocity impact can we have by tinkering with our budgets. And so just quickly running through this image here on the left-hand side, what we've got here is our forecasting tool that on the far left, this blue line, that's operating on muscle memory. You've got $2,000 allocated to new Corolla. If you change nothing and just set it and forget it, you're going to sell 20 cars. Well, as a dealer, you actually have access to this tool where you can drag your budget to the left and right and see what happens to sales velocity by increasing or decreasing your spend. What we're showing here is that adding $500 into the new Corolla bucket would then forecast 23 units sold, right? That nets out to an average cost per sale of $166, $167. I'm probably taking that as 1/3 or less of the NADA average. And I'm going to go ahead and make that budget change effective today. And what this does is it gives you, the dealer, control of your sales velocity. The image here on the right-hand side is visualizing the same data in a different way. And that the black dotted line is what happens if we change nothing. And the red line is what happens if we increase spend. And the way that we look at it here is your budget can actually shift consumer behavior and consumer actions in your favor. You can sometimes reduce your spend and take money to the bank if it's not going to have sales velocity impacts, or you can increase your spend and feel confident that it's actually going to work for you. And so whenever I think about the key takeaways here, it really is, again, just hammering this home. You set your goals first and focus on the outcomes, and then let the budget follow. Put your results and your objectives at the finish line as your kind of flag in the ground, so to speak. Then just trust the force and watch what happens, but be able to shift your budget where it's needed to achieve your goals and your outcomes. Jeremy, anything to add on this particular one before we move on?
This is a critical thing. Whether you're using Pure Cars or another vendor, at the end of the day, muscle memory says you need a set budget. You may break it down by model. But what you really want to continue to drive home is, how do I have the lowest cost per unit sold? And how do I have maximum momentum in velocity and in turn? And I think what we see is something we didn't really hit on, but it's a critical thing with this blind spot, is when you look at an Amazon didn't just become who they are by just knowing how to attract the customer for the lowest cost. But as you reduce your cost per sale, you have a lower total cost in this highly commoditized business than your competitor who's still running on muscle memory and isn't as good as you are at solving this blind spot. And the net result is, because you have less cost, maybe you do turn that dial on price down a little bit. And we all know, as you turn that dial down on price, your momentum moves. Now, that isn't saying you're eroding your profit. In fact, we're seeing gains in profit, but you're able to take a small part of what you would be saving by just being more efficient and reducing the blind spot and winning. And as you get this flywheel spinning even faster and faster by maximizing this key takeaway here, you really start to see everything fall into place and get more momentum in the overall business.
Right on. All right, Jeremy, you're going to take this one home with our last blind spot.
Sounds good. So this is the last blind spot, and it's really about the big picture. And when we think about this, if you're in private equity or venture capital and you're looking at a service business or a technology business with reoccurring revenue, lifetime value is something you need to know to help define how good or how bad the business is. And you want to know it pretty quickly. And then you want to compare it to your customer acquisition cost. Well, lifetime value is something maybe your CRM has a tab to talk about, but there's a big blind spot here. And when you ask yourself, we've seen margin erosion, there's a lot of uncertainty that dealers have navigated exceptionally well as incredible entrepreneurs here in 2020. But as you start thinking about, is there a way to make more? These monthly numbers, it's a race, you can get totally caught up in it. And it almost is one-dimensional. It's how much did I spend? Did it result in a sale? How much did I earn on the sale? But as you start thinking about this more on a map level, we do see patterns. If you pull service history and you filter it to customers who have bought a vehicle from you, you will see distinctive patterns. Sometimes customers who live west of your dealership have a higher likelihood of servicing their vehicle with you. Sometimes those that are 8 miles or more south of you have a very low probability of servicing with you. Well, this needs to matter, because when you start thinking about it and you look at 77% of drivers are using independent repair facilities over dealerships, this is a problem. If margin erosion continues over the next decade in variable ops, fixed ops continues to become more valuable to you as a dealer, and we know that's the lifeblood for all of you. But 77% is scary. And when you start thinking that less than 10% of franchise dealers are investing in digital advertising for parts and service, it is a big blind spot. So when we start thinking about key takeaways, number one, your strategy must be fluid. We cannot predict the future. We all know that. Hey, as of today, we're not even sure who the president is going to be. You need to be very fluid with your strategy. Number two, you need to focus on what actually works. Think about, I invested $1 in advertising. How does it relate to lowering my cost per sale or lowering my cost per RO? And when you start thinking about the third takeaway, it's flip the script and put results before budget. Start thinking about maximizing what you have to work with versus working in a finite budget. And if you let your desired outcomes and results determine your budget, you're far better off than having a budget and trying to maximize it. And then lastly, and I'll say kind of best for last, consider the potential lifetime value known as LTV of every single customer. Try to track it back to what media they came from, and ultimately think this way. When you really start putting the lifetime value hat on, you may find that your cost per sale is increasing in a certain area, but you're doing that intentionally because that area has 8-to-1 odds that customer won't be in the 77% that don't visit you, but they have much higher odds of visiting you. And if you know what you earn over their lifetime in fixed ops, you understand the value of trying to get their vehicle from the service drive versus paying top dollar at auction and transport fees and all the other things. This is a very, very powerful takeaway that the best of the best are thinking through and acting on. So with that, I want to thank all of you. Lauren, I want to thank you for presenting most of the material here and open it up for questions.
Excellent, and appreciate that. And Lauren, if you want to stop your screen share, we'll come back together. Just a moment.
All right.
I know those were the linear key takeaways. However, mine was really goes back to the title, the blind spots. So flipping the script to put results before budget, that really hit home with me. And there's an old saying by Abraham Lincoln, or it was attributed to Abraham Lincoln, that says, if you want to predict your future, you need to create it. And I think so many times we're reacting to our own biases and muscle memory. And so really great tangible takeaways, and I appreciated that. Interesting to hear what kind of questions we're going to get. So we're going to go ahead and thank you guys, and we're going to move to the live Q&A. See you in just a minute.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, David.